we had a wall basically for protection, with the Tower of London as kind of in the middle of it. And so this wall had a number of gates, so they were the main ways in and out. So they had a gate leading to the east, which is where we are, and there's a gate leading to the west and a few other gates. And the names like Bishopgate still exist, you know. So basically, everything, all the kind of economic activity of London was inside the walls, and outside the walls were kind of all the poor people who weren't allowed in, and they just did their basic crafts businesses and killing animals, slaughtering animals, making glue, general pottery making, all that kind of stuff, which is very, very polluting, and the conditions were very, very poor. So outside the wall, which is this was part of it, was basically a slum. And the slum got worse and worse and worse. I'll take you to the worst slum in London a bit later on, up until the end of the 19th century. A lot of activity was outside the wall and sort of concentrated in this area. But actually, it wasn't all bad. So there was some sort of merchants on the main roads and these kinds of things. So the road we just walked along was called Curtain Road. And here was the original Curtain Theatre, which was built by John Burbridge in, I think, 1571. Don't quote me on the dates, you know. But the end of the 16th century. So where you see this theatre, it doesn't exist anymore, was one of the original theatres of London. And there were actually 2 or 3 theatres in this area, including a musical. And William Shakespeare, his first play performed, which was William IV Part 1 or 2, was actually performed here. And so he was in attendance. There was a church nearby which we may not reach, that he used to worship at, so that was his local church. So this church lasted, I think it was damaged by fire, and they moved it to the River Thames, where we have the Globe Theatre. They've recreated the original Globe Theatre there in Southwark, just round the corner from here. So actually here was a centre of culture, and that's a theme that runs through the whole wall. Though it came out through the gates and, you know, merchants and so on. So this was a good plot of land to build the theatre. Land upon which the theatre was built belonged to the church originally. I think it's an abbey or something. It's Curtain Road, and this was the centre of furniture making. Another factor associated with this part of the East End is it's very close to the docks. So a lot of products, particularly wood, would come to the East End docks, be loaded here. So it was a ready-made raw material to be processed here. So the bespoke furniture making, it's not like IKEA furniture, it's like really good quality stuff, good veneers. There's even a brass factory where they put the brass onto the furniture and so on. So up until around about it lasted until the 1950s, so about 1870s onwards. It was actually quite a good industry. So some of the houses along the main roads are actually quite big and quite wealthy. It's not all slums. And making good money, basically building the furniture for London, until it moved out of London to the Midlands and so on, where they had mass production. This was handmade stuff. So up until about the 1930s, the furniture industry was very, very important here. But it went into decline as the industries exported elsewhere, or they went to other countries, mass production, cheap production. And so a lot of these buildings became empty and run down. And it provided a perfect place for artists. So that's the next phase. It's actually one of the connections with the street art. So actually Shoreditch became a very, very important location for artists. So they had big studios, very cheap to do their art. So we had Tracy Emin, we call the Brit Pack. Tracy Emin, Damien Hirst. We had,
George.
do you know these people? Gilbert George. I don't know if you know these artists. Okay. Facts from this development. I think there were 6,000 people living in this slum in very, very poor conditions. Only 3 of them ended up being rehoused in the public housing scheme.
3 people?
3.
No way.
And the rest?
So they just moved somewhere else. So you improve the conditions, but you didn't solve the problem. And actually clearing them out removed them from their livelihood, which actually made their life even more difficult.
It's the same as regentrification. You gentrify the area, but then the local people wouldn't benefit from the development because all the yuppies and hipsters.
That's exactly what's happened. All the hippies and hipsters and so on have come in. It's interesting. We'll walk around and you can have a look.
Nice.
When she was just starting out as a new artist and no money and was a cheap place and making kind of things to sell before she became well known and making lots of money from her art and so on. So unfortunately that pub is no longer a pub, it's just
transformed.